So I recently came across this video on the GitHub channel on YouTube where Cassidy here was explaining about the fleet command in GitHub Copilot CLI. So it was a very good video. She kind of just gave an overview about how if you have multiple tasks within a particular prompt, you can use a fleet to have multiple tasks being handled at the same time by different subagents. So as she explained it and she showed kind of the steps she was taking using slash fleet, I was curious to know what would happen with and without fleet, right? So if you look here in the video, she has two things that she's dealing with. One is the issue that she has from GitHub, and then she's put and here to combine it with the second task, and then the second task is to upgrade the dependencies from Astro and Tiny CMS in her application. So there's two different things going on in one prompt. So I think you should first go and watch this video to get a sense of what it is, and then I was curious to know what happens if you don't use slash fleet. What's the end result? And that way it will help me understand when I should use fleet and when it's not needed or not appropriate. So the first thing I did is I forked the repo, Cassidy's repo here of her blog. So since this video is a few months old, Cassidy's made some additional commits since making the video. So I had to go back and look at her commits and see where she made these changes before I could do my experiment. So I found here that these two changes happened here on March 4th. These two commits. So then I decided that I wanted to get the code base from the prior commit, and then instead of using her commits, I would go ahead and run the commits myself on my local forked version of the repo with the slash fleet and without the slash fleet. So here I made the fork into my own repo here, and then I also wanted to create the issue that she had. So she had an issue already, issue number 34 in her repo, and so I wanted to use the same text because I wanted to mimic her scenario as much as possible. So for me, this is the first issue I was creating, so it's issue number 1, and I just used the same text that she had, referencing again the same file, but then of course referencing it from my repo, my account, or my forked version of her repo. Once I had that, then I wanted to create two separate branches, one with fleet and one to do the same prompt without fleet. So I created these two branches here with fleet and without fleet, and then I went ahead and I ran them both. So the one with fleet, I used the same prompt that she used when running the command, which I just pulled directly from the video, and I put the slash fleet in front, and then the one without the branch without fleet, I just did this exact same prompt, but I didn't include the slash fleet when I ran the command. And then I let each prompt run, and when each prompt finished, I used the slash share command within Copilot to save the session information to a markdown file. I then got those two files from the two branches, and I just did a diff to try to see what's different, what's changed. So because I had now the two session reports, I was able to do a diff on these two markdown files to see how they differ, so to understand what's going on behind the scenes in terms of how they're doing the processing and what's in the session when you use slash fleet and when you don't use slash fleet. And generally they were quite similar. The difference that I found here is that with the fleet is using SQL and it's storing the to-dos in a database, and then it's executing through those to-dos within that table. And so the pane here on my left is with the slash fleet, and then the one on my right is without the slash fleet on it. And you see on the left here that one of the first things it does is it does a SQL command here, and it queries a database. It does a SQL call to select the ID, title, and status from a table called to-dos, where the status is not done. So what was interesting is when I use slash fleet, it maintained all the tasks that needed to happen within a SQL data structure. Whereas on the right, without the slash fleet, there was no concept of this to-dos table. So if I go another step here further and just find out everywhere where it mentions to-dos, we see here on the left that there's a bunch of mentions where it mentions to-dos, but on the right, without the fleet, there's no mention of it. You can see here there's a select, then it inserts, it creates a work to-dos, create work to-dos, and it inserts in to-dos the two tasks that it found. One was making the Twitter creator metadata generic, and the other one was resolving the GitHub issue 1. So behind the scenes, the /fleet command is doing that. And then it said here that it started to parallel the to-dos, and it worked on both of them, right? They were made in progress as they were completing the work. And then towards the end here, it did a select to make sure to see that everything was done before it completed the work. So other than the difference in terms of how it runs the session with the using the SQL and keeping track of the to-dos, looking at the actual final result in the code itself, source code itself was exactly the same. There were identical applications and changes made. There was some differences with the versions of the things as they were being upgraded. So if I go over here and have a look at the actual commit and see what was changed in the with Fleet, for example, this is my commit over here, and we can see that there were a bunch of files that were changed. The README package lock, package JSON, that's the session that I was pulled out the session information, and then there was a change to this basehead Astro file. So this basehead Astro file change was this, and the README was the same in both, but the versions in the package JSON were different. So generally, I would say that using Fleet or not using Fleet doesn't change the actual output end result in a significant way. It just changes how the processing is done. And so we can see that also when I do a git diff across the two branches, how it didn't change the application source code itself, except for the README and then the version numbers in the package JSON.